Hi, I'm Susie Gitzeg, Marketing Director and a passionate leader of empathetic, high-performance teams. Welcome to my LinkedIn video series, Leading Questions, where I dive into real conversations with authentic leaders. So today, my guest is Jon Siegal. Welcome, Jon. He is an SVP of Portfolio Marketing at Dell, also my current boss, and really excited to have you on Leading Questions.
Couldn't be more happy to be here as well, Susie.
Awesome. So we're going to go back in time to the first time in your life where you identified that you might be a leader. What was that like for you? What was the opportunity?
Great question. I think I go back to when, at least my first formal leadership role that I can recall was when I was co-captain of my high school football team. And, at the time, I didn't really see myself as the traditional leader in terms of being the loudest, quote unquote, guy in the room or athlete in the room. I was more the one that was ensuring that we're all working together as a team. I often tried to ensure that we kept morale up because we did lose, more than we won. And I also was the one that I often brought younger players under my wing and found oftentimes helping them, like the freshmen and sophomores, the underclassmen, if you will, helping them understand the do's and don'ts and how to be successful in the program. And in retrospect, these were skills, these were approaches that now have proven quite relevant in the modern workforce. Creating trust, driving inclusion, and in some ways developing the people. Right now, it's employees instead of athletes, but you see the point. And so I think my style, in some ways, was those were the early seeds of my style back then, and I think have been honed a bit since, of course.
I love that. It's from the football field to the workforce, and you took the skills with you.
That's
So
right.
You translated from the football field. When you became a manager for the first time, what was it like for you? How did the skills serve you in that capacity?
Yeah, I remember the first time I became a manager, it was for a small product marketing team. I think there were three or four of my former peers, actually. I was elevated into the role. And, I remember the first thing I did with all of them was I talked to them individually and told them that, look, my goal is to make you successful, both in your job and in your career journey, whatever's next. And I want you to know first and foremost that it's I'm invested to make you successful. And I think that set the right tone. And I had individual, literally before I even talked about the job, I had development discussions with each of them, understanding what because I never actually had those kind of discussions with them. What did they want to do next in the next couple of years? How could I help them on that journey? And I think that established right away, first of all, my approach for sure, but also it helped me build trust with them early on. Obviously, it still takes a lot more than that. It's more than talking; it's doing. But I did find that kind of set the tone. And again, I don't know. I didn't necessarily think it through, but at the time. But now that I look back, that is something I try to still do. Certainly in my larger leadership roles where I have more scope than that. But I still try to bring that same mindset into as a priority.
I love that. Yeah, absolutely. And it feels like you were able to build trust really quickly. I know that being elevated from a peer to a boss can be sort of a jarring transition. And I think that your approach led them to see you in a different light, know that you had their back and that you were able to support them on their journey, which is invaluable.
Yeah. I think the empathy that you mentioned, empathetic leadership, I think that's part of it.
Absolutely. So let's go forward in your career. Now you've been managing for a while, a good long while. What brings you the most joy about being a leader in the workforce currently?
Gosh, there's a lot. I mean, I think I would say building teams is something that I truly enjoy. Building new teams around new charters, new initiatives. And by that, I mean, I enjoy the process of, again, building trust, building collaborative environment, building hopefully a risk-taking culture where we can try new things. So I enjoy building new teams and then seeing the fruits of that. So seeing the teams achieve something greater than they could have otherwise. And I think, so that's obviously the fruits of it, and why we're building the team is to ultimately um, achieve an outcome bigger than we could do on a, individually. And I do find that that's what I enjoy the most, is then, seeing the team work together on a really hard thing, on a hard challenge, and coming through and in a creative way that maybe none of them thought about on their own. So I enjoy that, by building teams, getting people together that you never, very diverse teams, ideally as much as possible, ideal diversity in every which way, and then
Absolutely.
having them work together and seeing them again flourish and thrive is something I certainly get take a lot of pride from. And the other thing I would just say is turnaround stories. I
Mhm.
think through the years, there's a lot of talented people that we work with, right? And in the workforce and in our company now, or in the industry. And yeah, oftentimes I found people that just for whatever reason just weren't getting it done. Um, they weren't thriving in their role,
Mhm.
and they become out of favor, essentially, to be honest, with some of the leadership teams that they had been working with, or peers that they had been working with. And one of the things I actually have enjoyed and have been fortunate enough to do is find folks like that when they have either a skill or the right attitude, but just not the right fit at the time, and then finding a role that is a great match,
Mhm.
and then watching them thrive. And I have like that's really something I enjoy, because it's gratifying. I think, and as a leader, I happen to have, I have knowledge of the different types of roles across marketing, in our case, or outside marketing for that matter,
Mhm.
and have a good sense for the types of skill sets and knowledge and attitudes, frankly, that can work well in that. And anyways, I just truly enjoy that. And I've had at least 5 to 10 I can think of, where people have been, for example, in a product marketing role, and it just wasn't well suited, and then found a role in customer reference management, as an example, and they have just thrived, and then moved on, and then ended up in leadership roles in those other areas. So that's also something I enjoy as well as a leader, is helping to do my part anyway, and helping people that maybe wouldn't have gotten that second chance.
It sounds like, what your coach saw in you a long time ago and what your team saw in you. Now you're able to take that ability to see what lies in your team or what lies in folks in the organization, and find what their skills are. And sometimes they're skills that they don't even recognize themselves. I'll
That's
say
right.
that identifying what makes someone so special and realizing that they might not even be aware of it. You're like, you're great at this. You're like, everyone's great at this, right?
Right. Right.
But when you see it, it's such a unique position to be able to then help position them to something that works better.
That's a really good point. Yeah, I think oftentimes people don't have the self-awareness, and sometimes you can help them with that as well. But yeah, I think that. So yeah, those are just a couple of things for sure that I have taken joy from when it comes to being a leader.
Is there anything that has surprised you about being a leader? Maybe something you didn't expect.
Yeah, I do think, when I thought of what a prototypical leader was, again, growing up, I thought of someone that could do no wrong. And and I think the reality is that, at least in the modern times, modern
Mhm.
leadership is more about leaders that you can connect with, and and connecting with leaders oftentimes means that they're humble, and
Mhm.
so I think surprising, I guess, for me, has been that it's okay to show weakness. It's okay to make mistakes, and learn from those mistakes, and not be the one with all the answers all the time. And in fact, it's quite the opposite. And so I think that's something that I think that I probably didn't realize, and thank God, by the way, because I wouldn't
Yeah.
have. For me, it worked out, because I am certainly not the all-knowing leader. I think it's more of I take pride in bringing diverse sets of people together, and together, we can solve problems, as opposed to just a leader on their own. So um, I think that helps create a culture of openness and feedback and collaboration and risk taking as well. Because if a leader is out there saying, it's so, I made a mistake, This didn't work out. I was all in, admittedly I was, and this project didn't work out, but you know what? I take ownership of it and let's move forward. I think that demonstrates to others that it's okay to take risks. And because I think if the leader doesn't do that,
Absolutely.
if the leader shows or creates a culture where people can't make mistakes, then I think people are too cautious, and ultimately the organization doesn't move forward like it
I
should.
100% agree with that. I think it's been really incredible to see people say, I failed, maybe, not with the fail and the bow, but taking a look at things that they tried and maybe it didn't work. And what did I learn from it? And I think it's very easy to think about doing that. It's harder to actually do it, but I think it always builds respect from your teams, and it also inspires them to take those smaller risks. They know if they fail, it's a soft place to land, and they're able to actually regroup and try it again. But we have to practice what we preach, and I think it's a beautiful thing. I'm thankful that this, next gen of leadership or whatever we call it isn't the way it used to be, because that isn't the type of workforce that I'd want to work in, or my generation wants to work in. We want leaders that are empathetic and compassionate, and coaches, call us out when we need to, but also show empathy and compassion.
Right. Yeah, it is really fascinating how much leadership has evolved, even these last few years. Really.
I know. It really is. I think that brings me to my next question about remote work. We all had to change a lot about how we worked. How did your leadership style change, or your team culture change when everyone had to go remote?
Yeah, I would say pretty significantly. I saw a change. I think that at least in my role at the time prior to COVID, which is when I think of the before picture here, about 2/3 of my organization, prior organization, was local, and about 1/3 was remote. And so whether it was at my staff level or organizational level, we'd often have meetings where if you were local, you were in the room, and if you were remote, you were on the phone. And video was rarely used. And I think I didn't realize how hard it was for the folks not in the room during a meeting. I don't think I really truly appreciated it, even though I tried to a few times. I know we might have even had a class on that at one point, but I never truly appreciated it. And then once we all started working from home, during that tough time during COVID, and we started using Zoom, it was clear that putting Zoom was the great democratizer, as many call it, where everyone was on the same or level playing field. And I think inclusion was the big change. I think for me was the reality that I think I took for granted, thinking that everyone felt included when they really maybe didn't all the time. And being the one on the phone when everyone else is in the room is a really challenging thing. Some were pretty good at it, but that doesn't mean that's the way it should be. And so I think now, as you know, I think pretty much the way we're working these days, that if one person's remote, then we all assume everyone's remote, meaning we just use whatever meeting platform folks want to use. But I think that's made a big difference. So I think that's been the big change for me. Since remote work has really taken off since COVID, is how we build a more inclusive workforce. And I think in many ways we've now have a more inclusive workforce than we did 3 years ago. Would you agree?
I mean, it's kind of wild to think there's some legacies that are left from this experience that are actually good, that being one of them. And you're right. I've every once in a while been the one on the phone when everyone's in the room, and no matter what you do, and no matter how they try to wave at the camera, it's really not the same. Either you're all there, none of you are there. And I'm thankful that my remote team members, hopefully most of the time, feel just as included as everyone who might physically be here on a computer, down the street. So a good thing that I hope we keep.
Yeah, and look, we've never even met in person, I don't think. Well, we have maybe, but
a long time ago.
Years ago. Right?
And
yet we've worked together, in the last, at least certainly 6 months or so. And you had to actually think about that we actually had met.
I did. It's funny. Like when I meet people that I work with every day in person, it feels like you've met them in person. Like sometimes if you've never met someone in person that you're not working with, sometimes there's a little bit of an adjustment period or figuring out how they are in real life. But it's been funny. Every colleague that I would see after years of not seeing them, you're like, oh, hey. And it feels quite normal because the relationships built virtually are actually stronger than they used to be on the phone, I would say. And that is a benefit.
Yeah, no, so it's like you said, silver lining is the best way to put it.
We'll take it. Okay, Jon, last question for you. Advice to future leaders. Those could be folks already in the workforce, current leaders, or folks maybe who are younger who are maybe considering this path. What do you have to say to them?
Yeah, look, I think a couple things I'd say. First is make sure, my advice would be first, make sure that your manager, your leadership team is aware of your aspirations. My first opportunity that you had asked me about earlier in the workforce happened more or less because of that. I had at the time told my leader of my wish to try management out, and wasn't sure if it was something that would be long term for me, but I really wanted to try it. And I don't think had I not said that, I don't know if I would have gotten the opportunity at the time. And so as a leader now too, oftentimes where I can help influence that for leaders and individual contributors in my organization, it's really helpful for me to know which individual contributors in particular are interested in that kind of track. Not everyone is, and they don't need to be,
Right.
but for those that are interested, for example, in managing and leading people, make sure your manager knows, make sure and if possible, your leadership team knows. And then from there, the next step is ask for advice on how to get there. Don't just tell them that that's what you want to do, but ask them their advice on how to do that. And oftentimes they will want to help you. So that's number one. I think number two is be a mentor if you're not already, not just to one person, but to several. I think being a mentor is such a valuable experience, and very representative. It's not everything, of course, but it's very, very critical part of being successful as a leader is mentoring others. And I still do, of course, and that leaders always continue to as well. But I think being a mentor is something that you can do, and highly encourage you. And then the next one would be, don't just be a mentor, but find mentors as well, for yourself. Build, and I would say mentors plural. You can build a board of directors, as sometimes it's referred to, right, of mentors and support network of folks that not just support you, but challenge you as well in your career. And they could be inside the company, they could be outside the company, inside your group, outside your group. They could be in multiple places. But you'd be surprised. And sometimes they don't even need to know they're your mentor. I mean, I do admittedly have folks in my mentor network that don't probably realize that they're my mentor per se. Because sometimes I just have chats with them all the time and ask them their advice. And so it depends. But the point is, more than anything else, have mentor-like figures in your life to help you, in your career, because no one can do it alone. And I, for one, certainly benefit a lot from many others that have helped me on my journey in that way. And then last but not least, be yourself. Everyone else is taken. There's no prototypical leader, like the picture of a leader isn't one type thing. I think everyone has their strengths. Everyone brings their own set of strengths to leadership. And part of the art of being a good leader is also surrounding yourself with a diverse leadership team and diverse organization, and just having that self-awareness to do so. So you don't need to have this skill set or that skill set necessarily. Oftentimes everyone and almost anyone could be a leader if they have the motivation to be one. The good news is you can build on that. You can build on the strengths that you have and build your own brand of leader that you want to be and that you can be.
I love that. I think that's a perfect way to end, and really lines up super well with the motivation for all these conversations. We can only be our own brand of leader, right? And the ability and the space to create that and know that there's room in the workforce for all types of leaders that are bringing their own skill sets to the table, and able to coach their teams in ways that feel meaningful is just such a joy. So thank you for that, Jon, and for joining Leading Questions. And I appreciate all your insight as always.
It was fun. Let's do it again.